Hello, everybody. My name is Vanessa Andreotti, and first of all, I would like to say I'm sorry for not being able to be with you in Trento today to watch the other presentations and have a conversation about this. I would also like to thank Francesca Vanoni for the invitation and for the possibility of doing this through Skype and through the video. So my topic is Policies and Beyond, Global Citizenship Education Mainstreaming, and I would like to start with the context that gives rise to the need for global citizenship education in schools. Here we are talking about unprecedented challenges that are related to the intensification of migration, interconnectivity, cultural hybridity, ecological vulnerability, wealth concentration, armed conflict, and a reconfiguration of economic and political power. So in response to these new challenges, several institutions like UNESCO and other governmental institutions, NGOs, and schools have been mobilizing the concept of global citizenship as a response to these challenges. So UNESCO, for example, has launched a document in 2014 called Global Citizenship Education, where they define global citizenship education as a framing paradigm which encapsulates how education can develop the knowledge, skills, values, and attitudes learners need for securing a world which is more just, peaceful, tolerant, inclusive, secure, and sustainable. So in relation to other policies that have come before related to global education in Europe and in other countries, this is actually quite an improved document, an improved framework for global citizenship. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth into the document, show you a Canadian document also that has come up, and talk a little bit about the things that I've been involved with in Finland, which I believe Lisa Jaskelainen, my colleague and friend, will also talk a little bit about. And then draw attention to some of the challenges that we face in this area as well, and to the need for global citizenship education and pedagogy that goes beyond just the creation of the spaces that policy secure towards having conversations about the kind of pedagogy that will change the ways we talk about these challenges and possibly the outcomes of these challenges as well. So back to the UNESCO document. I think it's important to emphasize that UNESCO frames global citizenship as a conceptual shift that recognizes the relevance of education in understanding and resolving global issues in their social, political, cultural, economic, and environmental dimensions. So I believe the UNESCO document does provide the basis for countries and for regions and local schools even to develop their own understandings of the need for global citizenship education, and as I said before, to secure the spaces for mainstreaming global citizenship education in the curriculum. The document also talks about the need to move beyond the development of knowledge and skills and cognitive skills to build values, soft skills, and attitudes among learners that can facilitate international cooperation and promote social transformation. It talks about fostering in learners an attitude supported by an understanding of multiple levels of identity and the potential for a collective identity which transcends individual, cultural, religious, ethnic, or other differences. And again, I cannot emphasize enough how the document actually advances conceptual understandings and discussions related to global citizenship that were in the past very much tied to national identities or regional identities in ways that hasn't happened before. And that follows educational discussions or discussions related to the discipline of education as an academic discipline. It also talks about, this document, about cognitive skills to think critically, systemically, and creatively, including adopting a multi-perspective approach that recognizes the different dimensions, perspectives, and angles of an issue. And it also talks about non-cognitive skills, including social skills such as empathy and conflict resolution, communication skills, and aptitudes for networking and interacting with people of different backgrounds, origins, cultures, and perspectives. As I said before, much better than any other policies that have come before, and provides institutions, educational institutions, with a very firm basis to create programs and practices that will take this field forward in the next 20 years. Now, in Canada, we have had another initiative following or in parallel with the UNESCO initiative called the National Youth White Paper on Global Citizenship. And this was an initiative that brought together young people to construct a document. So it has the backup of representing young people's voices about the issue. So this was launched as well in 2014, and the objective of the document was to achieve to develop a policy or a strategy document that would support the mainstreaming of global citizenship education. And the document says that to achieve global equity as global citizens, we must challenge preconceived ideas, embrace rights and responsibilities, encourage explorations into various perspectives in collaboration with global entities, and to think critically and be taught to think critically. So from young people's perspectives, the teaching of critical literacy and critical thinking skills was extremely important in terms of approaching the complexities of global issues and perspectives in the curriculum. So this document now is being used in Parliament and in other venues to advance other policies related to global citizenship and to push the mainstreaming of global citizenship education in the curriculum, both in formal schooling, primary and secondary schools, but also in university education. Now, I'm sure Lisa has also talked about the two documents in Finland that have been created under her wing about global education and global citizenship education. And I would just like to draw attention to these documents that are excellent examples of how countrywide policies can influence what happens in schools and what happens in the curriculum. And here I think it's important also to talk about the fact that in Finland the process was a little bit different from the other processes that I've seen in other countries. And I think in that context, when I was a professor of global education in Finland, it was the only context that I perceived a real cooperation between a realistic cooperation between universities, NGOs, and the government with realistic expectations. So I was told that as I was coming from the university, my job was to give people the state of the debate and clarify the tensions related to different perspectives, different orientations, and give people a better an idea of the field and in-depth insight into the possibilities of the different perspectives. So I thought that approach to academic knowledge was extremely enriching because it presented the context of theory and bridging theory and practice in this discussion, in the need to go in depth at the same time that it acknowledged both the constraints of practice for NGOs and the constraints of policy for the government. So in that context, I was told my job as an academic was not to make policy or even to help with practice, but to help with the thinking space for going in depth into the issue for both NGOs, governments, and academics together, and teachers, of course, and the whole system to have a more serious and sober conversation about the issue, while also then thinking about their own context and how they were going to, in their own ways and with their own responses, independently of the academic debate, make decisions that were better informed about their own practices and their own policies in different contexts. So I thought that that was an important thing to mention, that this collaboration needs to happen in ways that do not necessarily require consensus, but they require a respect for the different contributions of the different kinds of knowledge that come to the table. So thank you, Lisa, for providing the context where actually I found that it was a very productive collaboration in this sense, where academic knowledge was not perceived to be elitist, but perceived to be offering a significant contribution to the table that even when it challenged existing practices or existing policies, and provided many different ways of thinking about the issue. It was not perceived to be a threat or a challenge, even. It was perceived to be exactly what academic knowledge should do. So in order to continue, I would just like to finish the presentation with some enduring challenges and problematic historical asymmetries that I think the documents that I've talked about so far, they point towards, but I don't think that it is sufficiently acknowledged that addressing these things are going to be a huge challenge. So the first thing that the documents still reproduce and critique to a certain extent is this historical asymmetry where part of the population is told that they're intelligent, benevolent, they deserve everything, they're clean, they have capacity for leadership, and the other side, the other part of the population of the world is told that they're ignorant, violent, they're destructive, they're unsanitary, and they need to follow the global leaders. So this idea of global citizenship as leading the world towards a single story of progress and development, although we talk about critical thinking and challenging assumptions, I think there's still much more to be done in this area. So these asymmetries create enduring problematic patterns of relationship that, as I have written before, through the acronym HEADS UP, I'm trying to explain here that these problematic patterns of relationship are generally hegemonic, ethnocentric, ahistorical, depoliticized, self-serving, uncomplicated, and paternalistic. So when we have that hierarchy and we try to connect the two sides of the hierarchy, we generally do it in a way that projects one view as universal, that forgets historical legacies and complicities, that disregard power inequalities, that invests in self-congratulatory heroism, that offers just feel-good quick fixes, and that waits for a thank you from the other side. So these are problematic challenges that need to be addressed if we want to transform the relationships that we have inherited historically and that are reproduced systemically in the area of global citizenship. So here is a little summary of the enduring difficult challenges that we have on our side of the equator in relation to how we think about ourselves and how we think about others. So here I put a few questions related to how we can see the other as equally intelligent, capable, knowledgeable, deserving, and complex. How do we recognize both similarities and differences in assumptions and aspirations? How can we see the limits of the knowledge we consider universal and unlimited? And in terms of global citizenship education and thinking about global education and citizenship education otherwise, the main challenge is how do we face a world characterized by complexity, uncertainty, plurality, inequality, unsustainability, and growing levels of violence. So here I would like to say that mainstreaming policies the issue of policy is an issue of creating the space for this kind of education to happen and mainstreaming that space, and that's absolutely important. But the pedagogical questions that come once we have secured the space are questions for the next 20, 50 years that we have to deal with. And they are related to figuring out ways of having different conversations about global issues. And this different conversation should be about transforming our fears and imagining the impossible. And by the impossible, I mean different frames of thinking, different forms of relationship, and different dreams of coexistence, moving beyond the naive hope that the system can continue as it is. And these different conversations should move us beyond polarizations and overcharged reactions that we see all the time in the ways we talk, for example, about the refugee crisis. It should clarify and contextualize different perspectives. It should make visible systemic and historical connections. It should expose the dangers of simplistic solutions. It should develop self-reflexivity and the capacity for people to relate beyond the need for consensus, fixed identities, or predictable futures. Here I'm talking about a kind of education that can learn from the repeated mistakes of the past in order to make different mistakes in the future, not the same mistakes all over again, and opening up our imagination to what we can't imagine. So I generally say to people, it's not about what we don't imagine, but what we can't imagine. So how could we imagine global citizenship education or global education for something completely different from what we have today or what we could imagine today? So that's my hope for for this field, and I really hope we have the conversations during the conference that can create the space for us to have these conversations. Thank you very much.